day and welcome to the Political Idiots. My name is Carl Thompson.
And I'm Don Cole. Welcome to the show.
Today we start a new special segment, Carl's Convictions. This segment will focus on issues that are false or misstated in society today. Today's topic, fake news versus journalism. Over the last year, the occurrence and propagation of fake news has been on the rise, bringing with it a downward spiral for reputable journalistic organizations. Entities like newspapers, mainstream online publications, network news, and even to a lesser extent, cable news have been affected and targeted due to the advance of fake news on the rise. Fake news is not the same thing as reputable journalist organizations. Let me repeat that. Fake news is not the same thing as reputable journalists. Reputable journalists go by a journalistic standard that aims to ensure that facts and stories are verified before release. Now, this does not mean that journalists don't get the story wrong. I mean, we already know they do. They have over the years. But remember, they're human, and they're relying on other humans to gain information. However, if a reputable journalist is found to be wrong, both the reporter and their organization issue a retraction and an apology, putting them on the right side. Fake news, on the other hand, does not go by that same standard. And most of the time, fake news is knowingly false and being spread as a lie with the intention to seed distrust and division. It is a form of modern-day propaganda that is designed to wrongly convince its readerships of the perceived perils of the opponent's views or actions. It knowingly distorts facts in order to support the writer's or organization's beliefs and passes it on to the public as solid fact-based reporting, when it is anything but solid fact. The people spreading this propaganda are willing to go as far as it takes to expand their twisted views. Fake news writers have mimicked legitimate websites like ABC, posted misleading headlines with no follow-up text or stories when you click on them, and they have spread scandalous thoughts through headlines that never mention the topic in the story. These stories and fake entities are being spread wildly through social media by people who are either propagate the lie or by people that are just too lazy or short-sighted to find out the truth. Fake news is just that. It is fake, dishonest, and propaganda. But fake news is not, let me repeat, fake news is not factual, research-based, and corroborated stories that government officials find unpleasing. The freedom of the press has long been a steadfast check on power and politics in our country. No one in power has ever found that very pleasing, as they speak truth to power and expose abuses of power that individuals within power do. Now, the reputable journalistic organizations are a cornerstone of our society, and they are to be respected, feared, and held accountable for their reporting. But they are not fake news. The president's continued declaration that news organizations that disagree with him are, quote, fake news is absurd. It shows that he is only interested in giving you one side of the story, the one that is pleasing to him, and he hopes that is pleasing to you. And this may not necessarily be the truth. We as citizens must hold people that distribute fake news and propaganda to account. We must hold our journalistic organizations to high ethical standards, and we must stand up against the propagation of false facts and flat-out lies. We must strive for information that is factual and grounded in reality so that we as citizens can make up our own minds, not have them made up for us. We as individuals must be educated and we must understand that we have to dig out the truth, find it, and make sure that we hold the people in charge and in government accountable for what they do, and hold people that spread and propagate fake news also to account. Thank you for your watching this special comment. Don, what is your thought process on this?
So, I agree with you on the fake news. I just had a bit of a clarification, if you will. I don't believe fake news to be necessarily propaganda. I mean, depending on where it comes from, I don't believe it to be propaganda. I believe it to be more of a money grab. Sites will put up any kind of salacious story that they come up, whether there are facts to back it up or no, to simply get some clicks. Is going to get a lot of clicks if it's come out that Hillary Clinton was doing something in the basement of a pizzeria, as did happen, and it got a lot of clicks and it got a lot of views, and because of that it got a lot of ad money. So a lot of these places simply pop up to print as much as they possibly can to get as much ad revenue as they possibly can. The problem that this creates is that your average Joe who only gets his news from his Facebook feed will click on this fake news story and will believe it to be true because it comes from the internet. It must be true. But then there's no rebuttal to it, and until a couple of days later when it's said that the obvious has been stated. No, it's not true. This isn't the case. But then that particular person isn't watching his Facebook feed at that time, or that story doesn't end up in his Facebook feed, and he never knows the actual truth. That, I think, is what's happening on the bigger scale. Not so much the propaganda, but a money grab for whoever wants to print whatever. And it's not journalism. It's purely for the money. It's a scam. It's not propaganda. It's a scam. It's a scam to get your clicks.
So I think that there's part of that can be true, but let's look at the idea of the definition of propaganda. It's information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. So you're right. A lot of this is based on clicks, getting ad revenue, but people that are putting it out there know that they're going to try to get in to this idea of people that are not going to look for news. They're going to be those individuals on the left or the right that are going to be sensitized by the idea of a headline that says, a false headline, by the way, it says that something's happening in a pizzeria for Pizzagate. They're going to click on it. Or even if they don't click on it, what they're going to do is hit share. And now it gets shared by everybody else. The people who write that know two things. One, people are going to share it, and information that is dishonest is going to get out and is to a point a political cause will get propagated. And two, people are going to click on it and they're going to get ad revenue by it. So they're doing it for both reasons. It is propaganda in its own particular idea, but it's propaganda for money is what we're looking for. It's not propaganda to move things. But part of it is they get to move areas. The other issue that we have, too, when you look at it is, sure, they posted this. They're on there. But it's not them that say it's untrue. It actually has to be the mainstream media, or it has to be people that are out there. And in the vast opinion, that never gets out to these individuals that scroll through Facebook or social media or Twitter or any place else online where they get this. They don't get to see it from the person who posted it saying, I'm sorry, I didn't mean that. It was a mistake and I wanted to take your money. No, they just sit there and they just let it continue to go out there. And what's so blatantly challenging, too, is that you have people in power right now in our current administration that have knowingly and willingly retweeted this crap. They've retweeted this idea of negative stories and fake news that are out there. And now my problem for them retweeting it is it's becoming a voice of the government. They are a government official. Whether they like it or not, no matter how they speak, whether it be through social media, through cameras, through the factor of a YouTube channel, that's what they're doing. They're sending out speech and they're endorsing it. Those are the challenges that I think we face. And all too often, the biggest challenge we have is that our populace, no offense to our viewers, because most of you are probably going to be involved, our populace does not take the time to figure out whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent. And I don't care if you come to a different conclusion. That's the idea. Me and you don't have to agree. But we have to do the research. We cannot just believe the headline. Millennials cannot just read the headline and say, we're good. They have to sit there and do some research behind it. Find out the facts and the truths. Do not get caught up in the 128 character world.
So on that particular point, I also have another point that I like to put, and your millennial reference and leads into this next point, and that is that the culture that we currently live in is a culture of instant gratification, right? So being first onto the wire is a big boost to clicks, even for the reputable news organizations, right? Being the first one out will mean you're on top of the story and you get a lot more views, a lot more clicks, and you get better ratings and everything like that. So what happens? The big news organizations, Fox, MSNBC, CNN, they all rush to print the facts. Instead of knowing everything and confirming everything, they will just go with what they have. Now a couple of days go by and there's some clarifications, and suddenly that Moroccan who shot up a mosque in Canada actually turns out to be a French Canadian who shot up a mosque. This story actually happened, but it's written about. Fox News puts out a story saying that it's a Moroccan. Turns out it's not, and they print a separate story. Clarifying and apologizing for their mistake, but the original story that they had printed of a Moroccan is still circulating out there with no update in it at all. This is Fox News. MSNBC and CNN do the same thing. Well, they'll report on a story, they're wrong, and they'll print a separate story clarifying and apologizing, but the original one that everybody sees the most of is that there's no new information put in that. It's just the original story. So the mainstream media hasn't helped itself in this area of fake news and journalistic integrity by doing such things. Now, I understand that they do, in fact, clarify and they do apologize, and to people like you and me who look for this sort of thing, it's easy to figure, okay, they messed up there and continue on. But to your average Joe who, again, only instant gratification Joe who gets his news from Facebook, doesn't find the clarifying story and thinks that, it came from CNN and Fox News, it must be true, right? So, and that's the problem we face right now.
And that's why in one of the things that I mentioned in the beginning, I said to a lesser extent, cable news. And all three of those spots you talked, they're cable news. So you're right. They're in an area where at times they're trying to beat the story out there. And a lot of times they'll get their two facts, they'll get it confirmed, or they'll say X person is reporting or Y person is reporting. We have not independently verified. However, and that's why a lot on MSNBC, they talk about NBC News as verified. And there's a difference because that's the actual, that's not cable news. That's a network news organization that has a little bit of a different spectrum. Now, they're all kind of owned by the same, but they're different with inside those two organizations. I think that's an important thing to note, too. It's why I said to a lesser extent cable news, because I don't think cable news is complicit, or I think they're kind of in some ways complicit in this, where they're actually having a negative impact because they're rushing things out. So I think that definitely is there. But one of the things that become, I think, so very challenging to this is facts can be slightly miscued. We do it a lot when it's breaking news on terrorist organizations, on terrorist attacks, on horrific events, because as you talked about, we have this idea that we want to keep rolling. We want to get it going. We can even go back to the idea of the Gabrielle Gifford shooting here in Tucson, Arizona, where I'm at. It was announced by two networks that she had died when she hadn't. And of course, the second one was quoting the first one as being a source. So I mean, and that's not necessarily, and that's just jumping out because they wanted to get in the story. They got ahead of themselves to try to get there. And you're right, that is a challenge with inside newsrooms that have to continue to be fought and continue to be tamped down in this day of instant gratification. But I do think that there is still a disconnect between the idea of a elected official, presumably the president, saying, okay, I disagree with this part here. They're fake news on my Twitter account. Just fake news this, fake news that. Because he dislikes it. Now, maybe the facts aren't all there, but the main meat of the story is the same. The Australian Prime Minister comes to mind with this. The facts are the call happened. The facts are he was upset that Prime Minister said that we had to continue, that he asked to continue the refugee acceptance program of 1,250 refugees that Australia was going to ship to us. He got angry about that, decided he wanted to go ahead and end the call. The TikTok reports show that. Now, how the heating of the call was, whatever. There's a sieve within the White House right now that's going to put out all this information. But those things happened. Donald Trump tweeted that he said this was crazy and a horrible idea, and he didn't agree with the idea of bringing in these thousands of refugees, which, again, is a false fact because there's 1,250. But then 2 days later, he tweets, oh, it's fake news because, the Prime Minister said that it was a peaceful phone call. The Prime Minister is going to be polite in public. That's what he's going to do. That's what most reputable leaders are going to do. They're not going to talk about their private conversations. But that's where we start getting into problematic trouble, when we sit there and say that regular mainstream news media is just flat out fake because we disagree with it. That is when we lead down to a problem. And that's my final thought on that issue. I want to thank you guys for watching today. Thank you for watching the special segment, Carl's Convictions. We hope you'll join us next time. My name is Carl Thompson.
And I'm Don Cole.
Thank you and have a wonderful day.